Welcome to timeless love stories that live beyond the ages. To us. The night is deep, and the world breathes slower now. Somewhere beyond the veil of time, in a land where the moon rises over ancient rooftops and willows trail their leaves in silent rivers, love still lingers, not in loud declarations or fleeting glances, but in the hushed ache of souls who once yearned, once waited, once lost. Close your eyes and imagine a world woven from silk and shadow, where history breathes in quiet lantern-lit streets and the air carries the fragrance of plum blossoms after rain. A world not yet shaped by modern haste, where every footstep echoes softly in stone courtyards, and the flicker of candlelight writes poetry on the walls. In this world, love was not always kind. It did not always arrive with permission. Often, it was forbidden, a fragile rebellion against the weight of duty, of name, of the laws that men carved into stone and women learned to bear in silence. It was the Eastern Jin dynasty, the 4th century of a land divided by warlords and held together by the old codes of Confucius. A time when a woman's voice was meant to be soft and seldom heard beyond her home. A time when sons carried lineage and daughters were traded into alliances like petals folded into scrolls. But even in such a time, even behind silk screens and scholarly texts, something eternal stirred a longing that could not be erased by etiquette or silenced by ritual. This is where our story begins. In the province of Shangyu, nestled among mountains brushed with mist and rivers that wound like threads of silver, lived a young girl named Zhu Yingtai, born to a wealthy merchant family. She was clever far beyond what was expected or allowed. Her laughter, when it came, was full of unspoken questions. Her eyes, when they wandered toward the hills, held dreams not meant for embroidery needles or wedding chests. She wanted to learn. Not the demure lessons fit for women, but the classics, Confucian texts, astronomy, poetry, the histories of kings and poets who had spoken truth in ink and fire. But no school in all of Zhejiang would welcome a girl, no matter how bright. So she dressed as a boy. With her hair bound high and her robe tailored to hide her form, Yingtai left home under the soft pretense of visiting kin. Her father, swayed by her quiet determination and her mother's subtle approval, allowed it, though he did not understand the yearning behind her gaze as she looked out across the land one last time. The journey to Hangzhou was long, but not lonely. Along the way, she met a fellow scholar, a gentle, earnest young man named Liang Shanbo. His smile was sincere, untouched by pride, and his curiosity mirrored her own. They walked together beneath falling leaves and rising birds, talking of poems and stars, of the way words could shape the soul. He believed she was a boy, a bright and unusual one, perhaps but a brother of the road nonetheless. She, beneath her silence, felt something stir. Have you ever met someone whose presence made the world quiet? Liang was that silence. When they arrived at the academy, nestled beneath hills dusted with pine and framed by the soft hush of bamboo, they were inseparable. The master noted their closeness and assigned to them the same quarters, a shared chamber with paper walls and an oil lamp whose glow stretched their shadows across the floor each night. And thus began their 3 years. 3 years of ink-stained fingers and late-night debates over lines of Confucius. 3 years of spring walks along the lotus pond, of sharing bread under the plum trees, of unspoken glances and laughter that came too easily. She played the role of younger brother to perfection, except, perhaps, when her voice trembled just slightly as she said his name. And yet Liang never saw. The world had never taught him to imagine a girl beneath scholars' robes. He admired her brilliance, praised her insight, even called her his sworn brother, promising eternal friendship as they drank wine beneath the moon. But love was a garden he never dared to look into. Not then. Still, something hovered in the space between them, something that stirred when their hands brushed while passing scrolls, something that deepened when silence stretched too long after a joke was not yet named, not yet feared. But it was there. And Yingtai, in the quiet of their chamber, would sometimes look at him as he slept beside her, lit by the flicker of the oil lamp, and wonder if love could ever find a way in a world that had no place for her truth. What is love, if it must be hidden even from the one it seeks? Outside, the seasons turned, the academy walls aged gently under wind and rain. The students came and went, but Liang and Yingtai remained two souls bound by knowledge, yet slowly drawn into something deeper. And one day, the call came for her to return home. No reason given, no farewell explained, only a promise that they would meet again, and a strange urgency in her eyes as she pressed a pendant into his hand, shaped like butterflies in flight. "Come visit my home one day," she said softly, her voice low like dusk. "There is something I wish to show you." Then she left, and with her went the rhythm of the days. And Liang, left in the echo of her absence, began to feel the stirrings of something unnamed. But that part of the story that unravelling belongs to a later hour. For now, let us linger here, where love was first glimpsed beneath ink-stained hands and plum blossoms in spring. The days after Zhu Yingtai's departure unfolded like pages torn from a book disjointed, pale and strangely weightless. Without her, the academy no longer breathed in the same rhythm. Liang Shanbo found himself walking the halls they once shared, listening for a laughter that no longer echoed, waiting for a presence that had quietly vanished like morning mist. He turned the butterfly pendant over in his hand again and again, its weight both delicate and mysterious. Why had she given it to him? What had she meant by the look in her eyes, that look he couldn't shake from memory? He replayed her parting words in his mind like a half-remembered poem. "Come visit my home one day." Was it longing, a plea, or just the natural warmth of a brotherly bond? He didn't know. He only knew that something within him had shifted, like the first crack of ice before spring. But to understand what Zhu Yingtai had risked in those 3 years, one must return to the moment their paths first crossed that day on the road to Hangzhou. She had dressed with trembling hands, each layer of clothing a small defiance against the life designed for her. Her hair, wrapped and pinned beneath the scholar's cap, was no longer a cascade of silk, it was armour. Her voice, trained to be soft and modest, had to carry the tone of youthful masculinity. Every gesture was a rehearsal of someone else's freedom. Can you imagine what it means to wear someone else's skin, just to breathe a little more of the world? When she first encountered Liang on the narrow path winding through a bamboo forest, she had nearly spoken in her natural voice. His presence disarmed her, not because of beauty or grandeur, but because of his gentleness. He bowed politely, offered to share the road, and spoke of Confucius as if the sage had walked beside them only yesterday. They talked of virtue and filial piety, of the 5 classics and the harmony of the heavens, but beneath her steady words, Yingtai felt a different harmony, a resonance that settled in her chest like a trembling note held too long. For Liang, the journey was a pleasant surprise. The young scholar who had joined him was clever, uncommonly so. He admired him immediately for wit, for insight, for the way he seemed to look at the world as if it were more than what met the eye, There was something in the way his gaze lingered on the sky, or softened when passing wildflowers at the roadside, who reminded Liang of poetry, of something not yet said. At the Confucian Academy, their days found rhythm in rituals of learning. Mornings were marked by recitation in the Great Hall, the names of kings and the maxims of the ancients repeated like sacred song. Afternoons passed beneath groves of apricot trees, where students scribbled notes and debated the meanings of righteousness. Evenings were quiet, the world reduced to flickering lamplight and the steady scratch of brushes across scrolls. And in all of it, Yingtai remained by Liang's side a constant, like a secret that refused to fade. There were moments when she almost confessed. One evening, during the spring festival, when lanterns floated across the sky like drifting prayers, Liang had turned to her and said, "If I ever have a younger brother, I hope he is like you." His words were kind, but to Yingtai, they struck the heart like a soft blade. Would he ever see her as more than that? Another time, when she fell ill from overwork and he sat beside her through the night, wiping her brow and whispering verses from the Book of Songs, she had nearly reached for his hand, nearly let the mask fall, but fear clutched her, fear of rejection, of shame, of undoing all that she had dared to become. So she waited. She carved her feelings into swords. She poured them into her studies, into every shared glance, into the pendant she pressed into his hand as she left. And she hoped that something in him had begun to stir. Yet Liang, wrapped in the blindfold of custom and simplicity, saw only what he had been taught to see. A brother, a friend, someone to miss, yes, but not someone to ache for in the stillness of night. Not yet. Still, her absence left something behind, an emptiness, a subtle disquiet that grew with each passing day. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the wooden lattice of his chamber, Liang sat alone and opened one of the scrolls they had once studied together. Her notes were still in the margins, tiny, precise characters full of fire and grace. He traced them with his fingers and felt a pang, deep and inexplicable. Why did it hurt to see her words? Why did he feel less whole now that she was gone? In Hangzhou, time moved forward, but in Liang's heart something had paused, waiting, reaching, questioning. Meanwhile, far away in her father's estate, Zhu Yingtai had returned to a world she no longer fit into. The gowns felt heavy. The silks, once soft, now itched. The endless talk of marriage and alliances filled her like cold water. She would walk alone in the evenings, looking to the north where the hills curled like sleeping dragons, whispering Liang's name to the wind. He had not yet come. Would he understand her gift? Would he remember her eyes? Would he follow? Or would the world once again be stronger than the truth of her heart? In the quiet after a storm, Yingtai knelt at her window, lit a single candle, and whispered into the dark, "Please, let him come." And somewhere back at the academy, Liang held the butterfly pendant in his palm, not yet knowing it would change everything. Love, like truth, does not always arrive in full bloom. Sometimes it begins as a seed buried in the soft ache of longing. Spring returned to the land like a hush of breath, draping the hills of Hangzhou in mist and plum blossoms. The academy's stone pathways, once covered in winter frost, now shimmered under sunlight filtered through bamboo leaves. And still, in the corner chamber where Liang Shanbo once studied beside Zhu Yingtai, A quiet absence lingered like the echo of a string that had once been plucked and would never stop vibrating. Liang moved through the days as though in a waking dream. He read the classics, he memorized passages, he bowed before his master and debated with his peers, but his mind, his heart, they drifted elsewhere, always toward the memory of a voice that had grown too familiar, a laugh that lived too long in his ear, a presence that had made the world feel full. Have you ever missed someone before, knowing what they meant to you? 3 years of shared learning had etched Zhu Yingtai into the very fabric of his daily life, and now, without her, the air felt thinner, the pages of books heavier, the tea more bitter. In the still moments in that twilight hush before lamps were lit, Liang would hold the butterfly pendant she had left him and stare out across the hills. What had she meant by it? It was too delicate to be a mere token of friendship, too intimate, too shaped by hands that trembled when they gave it. And what had she meant by her final words? There is something I wish to show you. He had not gone, not yet, bare uncertainty. Or perhaps something deeper, a quiet resistance within himself, the last barrier of a man too slow to admit that he missed her for more than what she had pretended to be. But now, in spring, he could feel it. The ache had shifted into something more defined, like mist condensing into rain. Emotion had become clarity. He wanted to see her again, and he would. But while Liang's heart stirred in the hush of an academy still lost in learning, Yingtai's world had become a performance of obedience. Her return home had marked the end of her brief rebellion. Her father, already aging and keen on securing a good match for his only daughter, had grown suspicious. Why had her spirit changed? Why did she resist talk of marriage now? What had the academy taught her, other than disobedience? But Zhu Yingtai wore her silence like silk. She smiled when asked, nodded when expected, bowed when summoned, yet behind her lowered lashes, thoughts churned like storm clouds. She'd given her heart away in secret, and now she waited, a bride with no wedding, for the one man who might yet see through her disguise. Still, the world around her moved like clockwork, unfeeling, unstoppable. Suitors came and went, dismissed politely by her father, and then came one name that could not be dismissed, Ma Wenkai. He was the son of a powerful official, his lineage wealthy and respected, his family's ambitions stretched beyond local prestige. They sought alliances that would secure their influence across the region, and the Zhu family, respectable yet modest in comparison, was a perfect match. When Yingtai overheard her father discussing the engagement, her hands turned to ice. She said nothing. What could she say? The rules of their world were as old as the calligraphy etched into ancestral tablets. A daughter was not a voice, she was a vessel, and even now, even after learning under the same roofs as men, even after breathing the same freedoms for 3 years, she remained a bird in a gilded cage. Her only hope now was Liang. He would come, he had to come. And far away, one morning just after the peach blossoms had opened their pale mouths to the sky, Liang did. He arrived at the Zhu estate wearing his finest scholar's robe, the butterfly pendant tucked against his chest. His heart pounded like temple drums, but his expression remained composed. This was the home of his sworn brother. After all, nothing more, and yet something within him beat with restless energy, a quiet hope he dared not name. The gates opened. The house was grand curved eaves and polished wood, gardens where koi swam beneath flowering trees, Servants led him through corridors that smelled of incense and old paper, and then, at the far end of a courtyard, beneath a cherry tree shedding its blush like rain, she appeared. Zhu Yingtai, no longer hidden behind robes and caps, no longer wrapped in silence. She wore a gown of soft green silk. Her hair fell like a black waterfall down her back. Her eyes were the same. Liang froze. It was her. It had always been her. The realization struck him like a bell clear, deafening and undeniable. How had he not seen it? How had he missed what had bloomed beside him for 3 long years? He bowed deeply, not out of decorum, but because his heart demanded it. And she smiled, softly, not with triumph, not with reproach, but with quiet sorrow, because even as his eyes lit with understanding, she could already feel the sand slipping through the hourglass. They sat together beneath the cherry tree, speaking gently, carefully, 2 people catching up after years apart, yet too aware of the tide rising beneath their words. "I wanted to tell you," she said, her voice low as dusk, many times. "I should have known," he replied, eyes searching hers. "I should have seen you." And then silence. Because what do you say to the one who has hidden everything for you, only to reveal it when the world has begun to take her away? He stayed long that day, lingering even as the shadows stretched and the servants lit the courtyard lanterns. But when he left, walking slowly down the stone steps that led back to the road, his heart was no longer confused. It was in love. And it was too late. Sometimes, the greatest tragedy is not distance or death, but timing. Love that arrives just one breath behind the moment it was needed most. The days that followed passed with a stillness that echoed louder than any storm. Zhu Yingtai sat by her window each morning, fingers curled around the silk sash at her waist, watching the garden beyond the lattice screen shift from morning mist to golden sun. The plum blossoms had begun to fall, their petals littering the stone path like soft sighs. In the pond, the koi moved slowly, unaware of the ache that pressed against the chest of the young woman who had once walked freely among scholars and now waited, silently, for the hour of her binding. Her betrothal had been announced. Ma Wenkai's name was spoken in every room, in every corridor. A son of nobility, a perfect match, a marriage to elevate the family's standing. Her father's voice grew warm with pride when he spoke of it. Her mother's eyes held shadows of sympathy, but did not resist. There was no room left for refusal, no ground from which to protest. Only the ghosts of her love lingered. And Liang, he had not returned. The evening of their reunion had passed like a dream, too beautiful to hold, beneath the cherry tree, in the soft pink dusk. She had seen the truth flicker across his face, the recognition, the sorrow, the deep and aching love, but it had come too late. The door to their future, once open, had quietly closed behind her. He had bowed as he left. She had not moved. Neither had spoken of what they both knew, because what could they say that love had bloomed between them like wildflowers between the cracks of stone, too fragile to be tended, too fierce to be denied. Some silences are louder than confession. That night, Yingtai sat before her mirror, brushing her long hair in slow, even strokes. She did not cry. Her tears had been spent long ago, in the lonely nights at the academy, when Liang slept only an arm's length away, and she dared not reach out. Instead, she whispered to the quiet air, "If you'd only come sooner." Far away, back in Hangzhou. Liang Shanbo walked the riverbank beneath a pale moon, the butterfly pendant clutched tightly in his palm. He had not spoken to anyone since his return. He had locked himself in his chamber, refusing food, refusing sleep. The scrolls on his desk lay untouched. The ink in his well had dried. The world had gone quiet, save for the memory of her eyes, the scent of plum blossoms, the way her voice trembled ever so slightly when she had asked him to visit. He had seen her. He had finally seen her. But the knowledge did not bring relief. It brought agony. She was no longer his to love. The pendant gleamed in the moonlight, two butterflies, wings intertwined, forever in flight. He turned it over again and again, as if seeking answers from its silent form. What is a scholar to do when the truth he has learned is no longer useful, when wisdom cannot shield the heart from the blade of regret? Liang tried to reason with himself. He told himself that she had never truly said the words, that perhaps it was only admiration, brotherhood, fondness, but he knew he lied. He remembered the look in her eyes when she gave him the pendant. He remembered the way her voice caught when she spoke of home et époux. He remembered everything too late. The next day, unable to bear the stillness, he wrote a letter to her family, a formal request to propose marriage, a plea cloaked in ritual and honour to claim her hand. He sealed it with the trembling fingers and gave it to a messenger. Then he waited. Days passed. Then a week. And finally, the reply came. It was not from Yingtai, not even from her father. It was from one of the servants. The letter was short, polite, final. Zhu Yingtai was already engaged. The match had been agreed upon. Preparations were underway. Her father expressed regret that he had not known of Master Liang's interest earlier, but the family could not go back on their word. Liang did not speak for a full day after reading it. He simply sat at his desk, staring out the window as if expecting the mountains to fall or the sky to break apart. The world remained unchanged. But within him, something unravelled. He began to fall ill, not in body, not at first, but in spirit. His appetite vanished. Sleep became a stranger. His once straight back began to stoop, as though the weight of his grief was bending him toward the earth. His friends noticed. His master inquired, but he gave no explanation. How could he? What words could possibly express the feeling of having touched eternity, only to watch it slip through your fingers like dust? Back in the Zhu household, preparations for the wedding had begun. Red silk was being measured, lanterns ordered, invitations written, musicians hired. Yingtai sat through it all in silence, a porcelain figure among bustling servants and chattering guests. She wore the bridal garments, she recited the prayers, she accepted the jade bracelets with numb fingers. But her heart was elsewhere. One afternoon, beneath the pretense of visiting her mother's family shrine, she returned to the cherry tree, the place where Liang had once stood. She brought with her the other half of the butterfly pendant. She knelt quietly and dug into the soil with her bare hands. Beneath the roots, she buried it. A vow without words. A love that would never be worn again. In another world, perhaps, they would have walked together through fields of golden rice, hand in hand beneath the autumn moon. Perhaps that he would have written poems for her. Perhaps she would have laughed with her hair unbound, without fear, without shame. But in this world of laws and fathers and silence, love came with a price. And the toll had been taken. The rain arrived quietly like grief. It fell over Hangzhou in gentle waves, soaking the fields and whispering against the eaves of Liang Shanbo's small dwelling. The roof above his head leaked now a slow, steady drip into a bowl he no longer remembered to empty. Time had bent inward for him, folding the days into each other like damp paper. Food sat untouched. The lamps burned low. He no longer marked the seasons by their names, but by the ache in his chest. He was dying. Not by illness of the flesh, not at first, but by the more subtle, unrecorded sickness of sorrow, of knowing, of remembering, of wanting still. He would sit for hours, unmoving, staring into the garden beyond his threshold. The plum tree there had bloomed without him. His petals lay like scattered memories along the path. They reminded him of her, of Zhu Yingtai's laughter drifting on spring wind, of the delicate curve of her hand as she passed him a scroll, of her eyes when they had met beneath the cherry tree. He had been a fool. And fools, in some stories, are granted a second chance, but not here, not in this quiet world of ritual and fate. Here, there were no grand rescues, no wild gallops to claim the bride at the altar, only stillness, only consequence. He kept the letter from her family near him, folded neatly, the edges worn soft from his fingers, every line carved deeper into his mind, every word a stone. When he could rise no longer, the physicians were called. They came with tonics, incantations, herbs steeped in boiling water. They looked at him and saw a young man, stricken, his skin pale, his voice barely a thread. But they did not know the cause. They could not name it. His master came to see him one evening, eyes full of pity and confusion. "You were once the brightest among them," the old man whispered, kneeling beside him. "What shadow has taken your light?" Liang did not answer. He could not. Some pain lies too deep for language. It roots in songs and flowers there. In the Zhu household, the days to the wedding were marked with red ink and bells. The match with Ma Wenkai had been finalized, a date selected, fortunes read, the stars had been consulted and declared favorable. And Zhu Yingtai. She moved through the ceremonies like a woman sleepwalking. Her smiles were practice, her posture perfect, but her eyes betrayed her. When Ma Wenkai arrived for the formal betrothal feast, she bowed with grace, knelt with dignity. He was polite, proud, and pleased with her beauty. He spoke of his future plans, of the sons they would have, of the estates she would manage. She did not answer. She could not. In the depths of her silence, she still saw Liang's face as it had looked that last afternoon, the brief flare of hope, the quiet ruin behind his eyes when she said nothing. Her love had arrived, had stood before her, and she had been unable to reach for it. Now she stood at the edge of another life, a life not hers, stitched together from her father's ambition and Ma Wenkai's expectation. Each night she returned to the garden, walking the stone path alone beneath the moon. She would stop at the cherry tree where she'd buried the pendant and whisper his name. Liang! The wind carried it. Maybe it reached him. One evening, a messenger came to the Zhu household, not official, not planned. He was a student from the Hangzhou Academy, soaked from the road, pale with grief. He asked to see Yingtai alone. She was brought to the outer hall, veiled and flanked by servants, as decorum required. The boy bowed low and trembled. "Forgive me," he said, eyes downcast, "but I bring word from Master Liang." Her hands folded at her waist, clenched without moving. "Is he?" The boy looked up. "He is dying." The words struck like thunder. The room swayed, the veil darkened. From what she asked, her voice like paper, from sorrow. A long silence followed. Then she dismissed the servants, broke tradition, and stepped forward. "Tell me." And he did, of Liang's long decline, of the sleepless nights, of the pendant he still kept beside his bed, of the way he murmured her name even in fever. When the story was done, she stood motionless for a long while. Then she said, "I must go to him." The boy looked away. He does not ask it. "I know," she whispered. But she would go. Zhu Yingtai arrived at Liang Shanbo's door at dawn. She wore no jewellery, no veil, no ornament of the bride-to-be, only plain robes. Her hair tied back in a scholar's knot the way she'd worn it when they first met. She knocked once, and the door opened slowly. He lay on the floor beside the low table, wrapped in thin blankets, his eyes sunken but lucid. He saw her, truly saw her, and a faint smile touched his lips. "You came," he breathed. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling, and said the only truth she had left. "I never left." There were no tears, no cries, only silence. A silence full of all the words they had never said, all the moments they had lost, all the love they had buried beneath names and roles. She reached for his hand. He did not pull away. Together, they sat like that, unmoving, as the morning sun rose through the mist and painted golden light on their faces. For a moment, it felt like spring again, as if time had folded back to the first day of the academy, when two souls had met beneath the bamboo trees and not yet known the ache of being apart. But moments are fleeting, and sorrow, when deep enough, writes its end with silence. Liang's breath grew softer, then slower, then still, and the warmth left his hand like a final word unsaid. Zhu Yingtai did not weep, she did not speak. She rose slowly, placed the butterfly pendant at his side, and walked out into the quiet dawn, her shadow long behind her. There are no songs for grief like this, only silence. Only memory. The earth had not yet warmed from the morning sun when the funeral was held. Liang Shanbo was buried on a low hill outside Hangzhou, where tall grass swayed like slow breath and the wind always carried the sound of unseen birds. The academy elders oversaw the rites, dressed in grey mourning robes. Students bowed low, heads down, hands trembling as incense burned in brass bowls. Zhu Yingtai stood at the edge of the crowd, hidden behind a screen of willow branches, her veil pulled low over her face. She had come alone, not as a daughter, not as a bride, but as the shadow of a promise that had never been fulfilled. They buried him with quiet dignity, a scholar, a friend, a young man taken too soon by illness. The mourners whispered. None spoke of the real cause. None dared to name the grief that had unstitched him thread by thread. But Yingtai knew. She watched the earth fall over his body, soft and final. She heard the hollow thud of the last clod against the wooden coffin, and within her, something broke not loudly, but like porcelain shattering underwater, She waited until they had all gone. Until the last mourner had bowed, the priest packed away their scrolls, the scent of incense thinned into sky. Then she approached. The grave was simple, the scholar's mound, a wooden marker with his name carved in careful strokes. Beside it, she knelt, folding her hands as she once had when offering prayers in the Academy Temple. But this prayer held no words. She placed her half of the butterfly pendant on the soil, gently, as if laying down a piece of herself. "I will never love another," she whispered. The wind stirred, and the trees around her seemed to echo her silence, the way ancient things do when they recognize sorrow. In the days that followed, preparations for her wedding resumed as if nothing had happened. Red silk returned to the corridors, Ma Wenkai sent gifts, her father walked the halls with pride, discussing dowries and guest lists and auspicious symbols. Yingtai did not protest. She smiled when spoken to. She practiced her wedding rites. She bowed to her parents with perfect grace. But something within her had disappeared. She moved like someone who no longer expected to live. On the eve of her wedding, she stood before her mother one final time. The older woman adjusted the red veil on her daughter's head, smoothing the folds, admiring the gold embroidery. "You will be the most beautiful bride," she said softly, her voice almost trembling. Yingtai did not respond. Her mother hesitated. "Is your heart at peace?" Yingtai's eyes met hers, deep, still, unfathomable. "It will be soon." The wedding procession was grand as all wealthy weddings were in the Eastern Jin era. Silk banners fluttered from carved poles, gongs sounded through the streets, red horses, draped in gold, pulled the bridal carriage through the winding path toward the Ma estate. But Yingtai had made a request a strange one. She wished to stop along the way, just once, to pay her respects at a grave. Her father had resisted, but Ma Wenkai, eager to impress his bride, agreed. And so the procession curved off the main road, winding through a quiet path framed by pines, until it reached the burial hill outside Hangzhou. There, she stepped down from the carriage, her veil still in place, her gown trailing behind her like spilled wine. The air was heavy. The sky hung low, and the wind, though light, carried the scent of something ancient, the scent of endings. She walked alone to Leng's grave. The musicians fell silent. The crowd watched in confusion as the bride approached the mound and stood motionless before it. Then, very slowly, she knelt, and she whispered not with words, but with breath. "I promised I would not love another. Even death cannot unbind that vow." A tremor moved through the ground. The mourners gasped as a sudden wind whipped through the grass, rustling the willow trees as if 1,000 invisible hands had reached down to stir the soil. The grave split open, not violently, but like a flower blooming or a door quietly opening. The earth parted at her feet. And before anyone could cry out, before Ma Wenkai or her father or the servants could move, Yingtai stood. She looked back once, only once, and her eyes were full of a peace that no one there had ever seen. Then she stepped forward into the opening earth, and it closed behind her like a sigh. There was no blood, no scream, no trace of a body, only the 2 butterfly pendants now reunited in the dirt, and a grave now strangely larger, with no explanation. The wedding procession returned in stunned silence. Ma Wenkai said nothing. Her father wept, but no tears would bring her back. Because she had chosen love over obedience, chosen soul over body, chosen Liang. And so the story passed from mouth to mouth, from street vendor to palace hall, from lullaby to legend, of the girl who became a scholar, of the boy who died for love, of the grave that opened and the vow that death could not erase. Some say that days later, 2 butterflies were seen hovering over the grave, one golden, one silver. They danced together, wingtip to wingtip, as if caught in the rhythm of a poem no one could hear. And they never parted. They flew high, beyond the willows, beyond the clouds, toward a place where no veil was needed and no name could separate them. Have you ever wondered what becomes of a love too great for this world? Perhaps it becomes legend. Perhaps it becomes wings. In the weeks that followed, silence grew over Hangzhou like moss over a stone. Zhu Yingtai's disappearance at Liang Shanbo's grave became more than just an incident. It became a haunting, a hush that slipped between conversations, a tremble that lived in the eyes of those who had witnessed it. No one spoke of it directly, but in the corners of tea houses, behind folding screens, on the lips of servants and scholars alike, the tale began to take shape. They called it the butterfly vow, a name born not of superstition, but of something far deeper, the need to believe that love could transcend the structures meant to contain it. The Zhu family mourned in their own way. Her father, once proud and unmoved, locked himself in his study for days. He did not eat, he did not speak. When he finally emerged, his hair had begun to grey. The servants whispered that he was no longer the man he had been, that his daughter's absence had hollowed something inside him that neither wealth nor ritual could ever restore. As for Ma Wenkai, he returned to his estate alone. Publicly, he said nothing. Privately, he sent offerings to the temple where Liang had once studied. He paid for incense. He paid for prayers. He did not ask forgiveness, for he knew he had never held her heart. Perhaps he too had seen it, the look in her eyes before she stepped into the grave, the quiet farewell that needed no words. He was not a cruel man, only a man chosen by a world that had not listened to the hearts of its daughters. And in that silence, something began to grow. The story. It passed from old women spinning yarn to young girls pressing flowers in books. It was told by lantern light and remembered in the soft lull of zither music, and each time it was spoken, the tale became richer, deeper, less about 2 lost souls and more about what it meant to be free. But if you walked the hill just before twilight, if you passed the fields of bent grass and stood beneath the willows that whispered secrets in the wind, you might have seen them. 2 butterflies. One with wings pale as moonlight, one streaked with soft gold. They danced together, slow and soundless, never far from one another. Sometimes they circled the grave and sometimes they drifted toward the sky, disappearing into clouds as soft as breath. Children who saw them would fall silent, watching with wide eyes. Old men would bow their heads. And lovers would hold hands a little tighter. Because they believed or wanted to that those 2 butterflies were not merely insects, but something more. Something remembered. Liang and Yingtai, no longer bound by names or duty or the heavy weight of this world. Just soul to soul, wing to wing. In the nearby temple, the monks built a small shrine. It was modest, a carved wood pavilion, its roof shaped like butterfly wings, resting on pillars inscribed with lines of poetry. They loved in silence, they died in truth, now they fly where names cannot follow. Pilgrim came, lighting incense and leaving folded slips of paper prayers written in delicate calligraphy. Wishes for love, for freedom, for courage. One note, found tucked beneath the stone basin, read, "If I must love in silence, let it still be real." Another, "May I find a love like theirs, or none at all." No one claimed authorship. No one needed to. In the capital, poets heard of the story and began to sing it. At first in courtyards, then in court halls. Zhu Yingtai and Liang Shanbo became more than names, they became symbols of fidelity, of defiance, of a love so pure it could not exist within the walls of tradition, and so tore through them, vanishing into legend. Paintings were made, two butterflies dancing beneath a blood-red sky. A scholar and a maiden kneeling at the mouth of the earth, a red bridal veil left fluttering on a gravestone. The emperor himself summoned musicians to perform the tale. And when the zither player's fingers trembled on the final notes, even courtiers known for their steel hearts sat in silence. Because they had loved too once. Or not at all, and wished they had. Some say that in spring, when the peach blossoms fall over the river like snow, you can still hear her voice soft and low, riding the wind. Others say Liang's laughter can be heard in the rustling of bamboo, just after the rain. But most simply remember the lesson. That love, when true, will not stay caged. It may wait, it may ache, it may fall sharpened under the weight of obedience. But it will not die. And when the world closes every door, love will find another, even if it must open the earth itself. One evening, an old woman walked the hill where the butterflies were said to dwell. She did not come with incense. She brought no prayers. Only a small folded letter in her hand yellowed with age, its corners soft. She laid it gently on the grave, then turned and walked away. The wind stirred, and from the willow branches above, two butterflies took flight. They rose slowly, spiraling higher, until they vanished into the orange hush of dusk. As if answering her, or perhaps remembering. The land remembers. Even when names are forgotten, even when temples crumble and scrolls fade, the earth itself holds stories in its breath, in the curve of a hill, in the bend of a willow branch, in the silence just before sunrise. And the land remembered Liang Shanbo and Zhu Yingtai. Years passed, generations turned like pages, yet still the tale of the butterfly lovers was whispered beneath moonlight, retold beneath quilts on winter nights, sung beneath lanterns during the spring festival, not as history, but as a prayer for those who loved in secret, those who longed in silence, those who gave up everything just to feel seen. But what of Yingtai's final moment? What of that step into the grave? It did not feel like death. No, not to her. It felt like falling upward. The air around her had shifted the moment the earth opened. She had not felt fear, nor cold, only clarity, as if the world she had known with its red silks and iron customs, its heavy rules and locked doors had peeled away, revealing something softer beneath. She had stepped forward not into soil, but into memory. Into their memory. Liang was there. Not as the pale figure she'd knelt beside, weak with sorrow, but as he had been in those early days at the academy, his eyes bright, his laughter quiet, his fingers ink-stained and trembling as they turned the pages of the Analects. He stood beneath a grove of plum trees, dressed not in scholar's robes, but in simple white, as if waiting for her. And she, still wearing her bridal gown, felt the fabric dissolve as she moved toward him. The veil vanished, the weight lifted. Her hair unbound itself like a river. The world, once shaped by roles, became formless. They embraced. But it was not flesh, it wasn't shadow. It was something between, a joining of souls that had waited too long. And in that moment, neither alive nor dead, neither here nor gone, they became one. There is a place just outside Hangzhou where travellers say the grass grows taller than anywhere else, and the butterflies never sleep. A grave rests there, uncovered in moss, its stone markers half swallowed by time. It bears no names now, only the carved image of two wings side by side. Those who visit leave offering small jade pendants shaped like butterflies, strands of hair from lovers braided together, scrolls tied with red thread. They kneel not for prayer, but for memory. They do not come to mourn. They come to feel, to remember what it means to love against the world, to choose heart over heritage, to know that once, in the shadows of a distant dynasty, two souls dared to leave everything behind for nothing but the chance to be together. The legend spread far beyond Zhejiang. It leapt across mountains, crossed rivers, whispered through palace halls and temple gates. It reached the ears of poets in Luoyang, of wandering monks in Sichuan, of storytellers by the Yellow River. And it changed with each telling. In some versions, they were transformed into butterflies upon death, their spirits light as silk, fluttering forever above their grave. In others, they became stars, 2 points of light side by side in the evening sky, never fading, never crossing paths with any others. Some said they were reborn, again and again, always finding each other, always falling in love regardless of the bodies they wore, or the laws that tried to separate them. But all the stories agreed on one thing. They chose each other. Even in death. Especially in death. Because what is love, if not the defiance of all endings? Years later, an old scholar in Hangzhou published a small scroll hand-copied, bound with red thread, adorned with a single-inked butterfly on its cover. It contained the story in its simplest form, Zhu Yingtai, the girl who became a scholar, Liang Shanbo, the boy who saw too late. The scroll ended with a question, written in small brushstrokes at the bottom of the final page. If you knew the cost of love was your place in the world, would you still choose it? The scroll became widely read. And widely copied. In temples across China, young girls began to leave prayers not for wealth or beauty or long life, but for love like Yingtai's. Love that waits. Love that breaks rules. Love that does not fade. And in that shift in the quiet return to feeling, to soul, the legend became something more than just a story. It became a mirror. For every person who had once loved in silence. For every person who had once wished to be free. On a quiet night in Hangzhou, when the air is thick with the scent of plum blossoms, If you walk along the river banks where the willow trees sway, you may feel it. A hush in the wind, a softness in the sky. Two butterflies circling above the reeds, pale, glowing, unbound. They do not land. They do not tire. They have nowhere to return to, for they have already arrived. The seasons turned. Plum blossoms gave way to lotus blooms. The rains of spring softened the earth, and the heat of summer cracked the soil again. Harvests came and went, empires rose, fell, and left behind only stone ruins and hollow names. But the story of Liang Shanbo and Zhu Yingtai endured. Not in the scrolls of officials, nor the annals of kings. Their names were not etched on monuments, nor woven into banners of war. No, their tale lived in softer places, in the trembling breath of lovers, in the hush that falls before a kiss, in the eyes of someone watching someone else leave and wondering if love alone is enough to make them stay. In time, people began to call the site of their burial the Butterfly Mound. A simple name, born of sorrow and wings. And pilgrims came, not in droves, not in the way they visited the tombs of emperors or the shrines of saints, but one by one, like whispered prayers. Some came to remember, some came to forget, some came simply to ask, is it still possible to choose love, even when it asks you to give up everything? They left offerings of rice, of tea, of folded silk butterflies. And they left tears too, tears like the ones Yingtai never shed, tears for the words Liang never spoke. Tears for all the quiet love stories that history had no room for. There is a story told in Hangzhou of a young bride who fled her wedding in the middle of the night, dressed in red, her slippers soaked from running through wet grass. She came to the butterfly mound and knelt until morning. When the sun rose, she left her wedding veil hanging from a branch near the grave. Then she walked away, never to return. No one knows her name, but every spring women still hang red threads on the branches of the trees there, some for courage, some for memory, some for the ones who were never given a choice. The legend of the butterfly lovers became opera. First sung in private halls, then performed on great wooden stages where musicians bent notes into sorrow. The melodies curled into the night like incense. Yingtai's aria, soft, trembling, sung just before her final leap into the grave, became famous across provinces. Women wept into their sleeves, men bowed their heads. And when the final curtain fell, the stage was always left in darkness, save for two paper butterflies slowly rising on invisible strings, circling one another as the audience held its breath. Sometimes they touched. Sometimes they didn't. But they never flew apart. Centuries later, when Western visitors came to China and asked for tales of romance, it was this story the locals told. Not Romeo and Juliet, okay. Not Tristan and Isolde, but Liang Shanbo and Zhu Yingtai, a love both braver and quieter. Not just a tragedy of passion, but of endurance, of patience, of love that waited beneath the weight of custom and bloomed in secret before breaking free, not in defiance of death, but through it. Because theirs was a love that did not rage against the world. It simply refused fate. And fade. And still the butterflies returned. Not always seen, not always caught by eye, but felt. A flutter in the chest when reading a love letter. a moment of stillness before saying I do. The sense that someone somewhere once loved like this, fully, softly, without permission. Some scholars debate whether the story is true. Was there truly a Liang Shanbo, a Zhu Yingtai? Did the grave open? Did the earth swallow her? Was it only metaphor? But in love, what matters is not whether something happened, but whether we believe it could. And in believing, in choosing to believe, we bring them back. Again and again. On the 7th day of the 7th lunar month, the Kishi festival, the lovers' night paper butterflies are still released on the rivers of Zhejiang. They float on lotus boats, lit by candles, drifting beneath bridges older than memory. Couples watch them go, holding hands in the dark, whispering wishes. Some wish for passion. Some wish for peace. But many simply wish to be chosen. Not for dowry, not for duty, but for who they are. As Yingtai chose Liang, and as Liang, too late, chose her back. There is a bench beneath the willows by the butterfly mound, now plain, unadorned, worn smooth by time. A carving runs along its edge, shallow and nearly faded. The world did not give them peace, so they made their own. Sometimes, when dusk falls and the air grows soft, you might feel a warmth at your back as you sit there, as if two figures had just stood up and walked away, as if they had been sitting with you all along, watching, waiting, and finally flying. Night has fallen. The sky is a pool of deep indigo, veined with the pale breath of stars. The wind hushes through the leaves, not as sound, but as memory, the kind that moves gently through the soul and stays there, quiet, unmoving. This is where all stories end. Not in the final word, but in the echo that lingers afterward. And so we arrive, slowly, reverently, at the end of a love that refused to die. Liang Shanbo and Zhu Yingtai, two names etched not in stone, but in stipin siso visamun tamlines, in longing, in the unspoken ache of every soul who has ever loved across boundaries, across expectations, across lifetimes. What makes their story endure? Perhaps it is not the tragedy. There are many tragic loves in this world. No, what makes theirs endure is its stillness. The patience of it. The way they love not with fire, but with the quiet persistence of water shaping even the most unyielding of stone. They did not curse their fate. They did not burn down the world. They simply chose to carry love in silence, chose to protect it in disguise, chose to follow it into death. And in doing so, they made something greater than defiance. They made a sanctuary, a place where love could exist freely, untouched by the laws of men. Long after the empire that birthed them crumbled into dust, long after the scrolls turned to ash and the emperor's names were forgotten, Liang and Yingtai remained. In the whispers of storytellers, in the quiet brushstrokes of scroll painters, in the trembling voice of a singer who reaches the final verse and can barely breathe through the sorrow. Their love became not just a tale, but a mirror. For the orphaned, for the unloved, for the girl asked to marry a man she's never touched, for the boy who waits for someone who cannot come, for every soul who has ever felt that love and duty do not walk the same path. And in that mirror, generations have seen themselves. Not in the details, not all have studied in disguise or leapt into graves, but in the feeling, the ache, the knowing that love is sometimes a quiet rebellion, that even the smallest heart can carry a story powerful enough to shake the world. Today, the tale lives on. In every adaptation on stage, in film, in novels, each artist adds their breath to the flame. They do not rewrite it. They remember it. They gather its pieces like scattered petals and reshape it for those who still seek hope in a world of barriers. And every time the two butterflies rise on a screen, a stage, a page, the audience falls silent. Because they recognize the truth. That in the end, nothing was conquered. Only surrendered. The self to love. The world to a whisper. And so, if one night you find yourself unable to sleep, and the darkness outside feels deeper than usual, step quietly to your window. Listen to the wind. Watch the way the trees move, as if nodding to something older than time. And if you are lucky, if your heart has ever broken wide enough to hold something too big for words, you may feel them. Not as ghosts, not as myth, but as presence. Two butterflies, still circling, still in love. Their grave remains, but they are no longer there. They live in the spaces between, in every vow whispered by candlelight, in every lover's touch hidden behind closed doors, in every moment when love is chosen not with fanfare, but with stillness. They live in you, because the greatest stories do not end. They echo, softly, endlessly. So rest now. Let the hush of their wings carry you to sleep. Let the silence raid you. You are not alone in your longing. And somewhere, beneath a starlit sky older than memory, two butterflies are still dancing.